In this video, we will continue to talk about materials and textures in Octane for Blender. So in the previous video, we started to use some textures to create some PBR materials, which means physically based render materials, which means that they are physically accurate. So they behave like they would in real life. And we saw that a material is just a way that something reacts to light. So by having different effects, you can get different types of materials, which could be more glossy, more specular, and so on. We also talk about the different types of textures. So this one here, it's an unwrapped texture, which is unwrapped around the table. So we saw that we can use texture like this to be really specific and do branding or packaging. So to study the object into its into the finest details. So this is kind of doing product design or industrial design, depending on what you need to do. So there are some texture that you can only apply once, like also TV screen or painting or a photograph, or again the UV maps unwrapped. So you cannot use tiling with these textures. You cannot repeat them many times. So we saw that we have two different types: the texture that you can repeat and texture that can be assigned only one. But their channels, the way they work, they are the same. So again, these are like applied graphics here. So you can apply logos, graphic design, especially again when you work with unwrap and UV maps that are specific for an object and not like generic, which are the textures that can be repeated many times. So there are some software that you can use to create unwrapping, UV mapping. You can use Blender, but and also sculpting. So if you want to do sculpting and painting, create unwrapping and unwrap maps, you can use ZBrush. You can use Mudbox again for 2D and 3D painting and sculpting. You can use also Blender. And if you want to do just materials and texturing and PBR, you can use Armor Paint, which is an open source software, and also Substance Painter from Adobe. So there are like many options out there to create specific materials, unwrap textures with different layers. But we also gonna see many effects, many things that we can do in Octane for Blender. So these are all PBR materials and textures. So PBR materials contain PBR textures, and we will continue to talk about this in this video. We already started, but we're gonna focus a little bit more, and also how we can create nodes. And we saw which are the most important, which are the albedo. It's also called the diffuse and normals and bumps that create 3D superficial effects. There are also others like ambient occlusion and specular, which can be used also as a glossiness. So we have glossiness and roughness. So glossiness is the opposite of roughness, and displacement also is going to create a real 3D effect. So I want to show you in this video also in the later part how to create a displacement, which is an actual extrusion. It's not a fake 3D superficial effect like the normal and the bump. So you can see here we got these wooden floor textures, and we used it in this scenery here, which is white modern living room. And that's the author right there. You can find it in Sketchfab. You can download it, and it's free, and it's with a CC BY license. So just credit the author. So again, this is the model that we're using. You can follow along. You can download it, or you can use one of yours. And remember also to add some lights. We talked about lighting before in the other lessons. So add lights, because lights are really important when you need to study the materials. I also want to suggest you a couple of resources here. The first one is Materialize and this is a software, open source and free. You can download it, and you will find a video guide in the channel showing you how to download it and install it and use it. And essentially, if you only have a diffuse texture and you need all the other textures to create your PBR material, you can use this software here to generate all the other missing textures. So for example, you only have a diffuse, you need a normal, you need the displacement, you need the bump, you need the roughness. You can create it from there. And also another one is normal map online. This runs entirely on the web, so you don't need to download and install anything. You can see you can like change or turn a normal map into a displacement, or a height map into a normal map. Now these are all terms that essentially mean the same thing. Height map, it means the bump map essentially, but they're just slightly different. They have different uses. So I'll try to be more specific in the last part of the video. Now another thing I want to suggest to you when you work with materials is increase a little bit the samples. So we didn't talk about render settings yet. We didn't get to the rendering part of the course, but if you increase a little bit the samples, you're gonna have better results in order to see if your material is actually working, or it has something that is not good, it's not working. So to increase the samples in the viewport here and in the render in general, you can go to the render settings, go to the max samples, and set a higher number there. So I've set this 2000, so it's a little bit better. You can see the noiser is working better. The noise is getting away. So that's your main goal when you need to increase the quality, to get rid of the noise. But something you also want to try here is to use regions or region rendering. So I've opened up the Show Octane viewport from the render settings again, and so if I don't want to render everything, if I just want to concentrate on one area of my project, in order not to waste too much time in testing the materials, in testing the lights, or part of my scene, I can use the region here. Now you have two types of region. This one here leaves the rest of the image visible. So I can, right now I'm rendering just that little box, but the rendering stays there on the rest of the image. So for example, if I change a little bit this texture here with the node, and you have the possibility to do some color correction here in Octane. You have the possibility to change the image slightly in terms of brightness and power and gamma. So you can see here I'm adjusting the power, and when I decrease the power, it's going to show what's beneath that superficial layer, which is kind of a black surface. But also gamma, you can see you can make things darker or brighter, so you can work on your customization for a texture that you have downloaded and use it. You can also invert, which is gonna make, well, the inverse of the texture that you have. So you can see that right now I render everything, but if I use only the region here and do the same thing, it's gonna render. Well, you can also see it here right now. You can see that the rest of the image is displaying a lot of noise, while inside the box I have a better result. So, and you can see the rendering going on the bottom left of this viewport. So this means that I'm not rendering everything, I'm just rendering that little area, and this means that I'm gonna be faster, and I can see where my material is working there with the light, so I can be a lot faster to understand how the material is behaving on a particular part of the scene is behaving. Now this second one here next to the previous is just the same thing, but it leaves a black screen. And again, I can hold Control and the scroll wheel to zoom, navigate, and see into more details.